Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about one it took me a while to find. It's a Spanish-Italian co-production, and the Spanish and Italian titles and English title are all totally different. So the Italian title is Una tomba aperta, una bara vuota, and that means, it means an open grave, an open tomb, an empty grave. I think that's what it means. The Spanish title translates to the House of the Living Dead, and the English title is Night of the Scorpion. Now, Night of the Scorpion sounds like a typical giallo. House of the Living Dead sounds like a zombie movie, and an open tomb, an empty grave, I think I'm saying that right, that is kind of unclear. So anyway, none of these titles really have anything to do with the plot of the movie. It is a giallo. Like I said, it's Spanish and Italian. The director is the Spanish. It is actually, I just realized I don't have his name on the poster. It's Balcazar is his last name. His first name starts with an I. Alonso Balcazar, I think. But on this particular poster, they say it's directed by Al Bagran, which I guess they thought was more American or English sounding. Al Bagran. Never met anyone with the last name Bagran before. And that's not this guy's last name either. It's Balcazar. Now, this guy, Balcazar, had been producing and directing many Spanish films, mostly Westerns. And I watched a few of them, and they were pretty boring. Although I did see two of them that had Fernando Sancho in them. And in one of them, he was really good. And in the other one, he had kind of a crappy part. So anyway, this movie's about a guy who got drunk and maybe killed his wife. They lived in a mansion in an undisclosed location. We don't even, I assume it's supposed to be England, I guess, because all the characters have English sounding names like Ruth, Jenny, Helen, and Oliver. So I'm pretty sure they're attempting to imply that it was an English setting, although they don't really say that, but I think based off those names, they sound pretty English. Anyway, it was Oliver and Helen that lived there, along with Jenny, their sister, and their father, who dies before the movie starts, and the father's wife, whose name, I forget the wife's name. Also, all these characters look the same exact age, including the father's wife. And so the first hour of this movie is just basically a soap opera. And then in the last half hour, people start getting killed off. So before we go any further, I give this one a 5 out of 10. I'll give you a few credits here. It has Daniela Giordano, who plays Ruth, which is Oliver's second wife, who is in most of the movie. She was in 1970's Shadow of Illusion, which was directed by Mario Caino, Italian giallo. Then we also have Giorgia Desider. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right because it doesn't sound Italian. Desider. She probably married someone that wasn't Italian. She plays Helen, the first wife of Oliver. She was in The Beast with the Frozen Blood, also known as Slaughter Hotel from 1971. That one had Klaus Kinski in it, and it did not have a hotel in it. Even though the American or English title is Slaughter Hotel. I did a video on that one, so you can search for that one. It also features Osvaldo Genaziani, who plays the private eye detective because people start getting killed off and Ruth hires him. He was in Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion from 1970. And he was also in Death Walks in High Heels from 1971. Both of those movies were directed by Luciano Ercoli, which I saw both of them, but I didn't do videos on them because they're not really horror. They're more like mystery thrillers. And then we also have Carlo Gentili, who plays a doctor in this movie, and he was also in Death Walks in High Heels. The actors were all either Spanish or Italian, mostly Italian. Spanish director. And I give this a 5 out of 10. It's like the whole first hour is like kind of boring. And then this last half hour is not really like enough to make up for it. So also, this one's not streaming anywhere. You're gonna have to find like a copy of it on DVD somewhere if you want to watch it. So I'm gonna tell you about the plot. If you really don't want to hear it, you can turn the video off, although it's not really worth watching unless you're like an absolutely obsessed with gialli, and you want to see every single piece and you're willing to go out and buy this. So basically, the first hour we find out all these relationships. Now, the writer does do a good job, and I think the director, Balcazar, did write this. At least he has one of the writing credits. There are many writing credits on it, but he at least co-wrote it. Anyway, so we have Oliver, who got drunk at the beginning, maybe pushed his wife over the banister at the top floor, at the top of the stairs, or maybe the wife just fell off. Wife was Helen, by the way. Or maybe somebody else pushed her over. So who else is in the house? We've got the sister Jenny, and we've got the stepmother, who looks to be the same age as everyone else. And I forget the stepmother's name, darn. The stepmother, we find out, is really in love with Oliver, therefore does not like Helen. And we find out that Jenny is in love with Helen in a weird, like, sex quadrilateral. So Oliver loves Helen. Helen only is with Oliver for the money. Jenny loves Helen. And then stepmom loves Oliver. There's also a maid and a groundskeeper that work at the mansion. So after Helen dies, the stepmom says, now we can be together. And he's like, we can't be together. You're my stepmom. You were married to my dad and he loved you. I don't know. This is weird. I'm not going to do this. I can't live here anymore. I got to go. And so he leaves, he moves out, and then he meets Ruth. And then they get married. Oliver and Ruth get married. And then he's like, Ruth, let's go live in my family's mansion. So they go back, and the stepmom's still living there, and the sister's still living there. So they live there, and then Ruth gets freaked out because the first wife died. And then I forget who dies first, but Ruth ends up hiring a private detective to investigate. And the movie does a poor job of trying to get you to like care about who the killer is or like figure out who the killer is. Like in most gialli, I can't figure out who the killer is because there's so many characters and like no one seems obvious, or one person seems obvious and it's never that person, right? So people start getting killed off. I'm trying to think who dies first. Actually, I think she hires the private detective and then he gets killed first. Pretty sure. And then you might suspect Jenny, the sister. You definitely are supposed to, I mean, like, the most evil-seeming person in this movie is the stepmom, because she may have killed she has the most motive to kill Helen, because Everyone else loved Helen. So why would anyone else kill her? The only person that disliked Helen was the stepmom. So she's like the obvious suspect. And then it's like, well, maybe Oliver killed her, but like, because they weren't really getting along. But like, he really loved her, so why would he have killed her? And then like, maybe Jenny killed her because she was jealous that she was married to her brother. But like, Jenny loved her, so why would she kill her? So really, the only person that had a real motive to kill her was the stepmom. Unless it was like randomly the maid, or randomly the housekeeper, the groundskeeper, gardener guy, who didn't even have a name and wasn't even listed in the credits, which is odd because every other actor in the entire movie is listed in the credits except for him. So basically, like, it's pretty obvious that the only person with an actual motive is the stepmom. So that made me assume that it was not the stepmom that was the killer. Then, like, after an hour of no one actually dying, the private investigator dies, and then, like, one by one, all the characters get killed by someone with black gloves. So it's like, you know, obviously trying to be like a Dario Argento style giallo. So most of the people die getting their throat cut, which I'm going to zoom in here. And this is like mostly irrelevant probably to everyone watching this, but this image right here, I've been familiar with this image for like 15 years because there's a death metal band called In Veracity, and they use this exact image as their album cover. So this is a very obscure film. I'm not sure what the release like history is, but I think it was released in 1974 in America as Night of the Scorpion, which there's no scorpion or mention of any scorpion in the whole movie. And then I don't think it was released again like on physical media until very recently, because in the last like few years, in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been an increased interest in gialli. And I don't think there was an American release before that, which means this band In Veracity probably scoured some kind of archives, because the album came out in 2005. So maybe they scoured the internet for obscure horror posters, because if I'm not mistaken, the chances that those guys had even seen this movie are extremely slim, because they would have had to have gone to the movies in 1974 in order to see it. I think. I do not think there was a physical release of this in America at the time that they put the album out. I know I should have looked that up before, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. So anyway, I saw this poster and I was like, holy crap. I didn't even know that they took it from a movie poster, although now it seems obvious, because now I know it's obvious 70s art. Well, anyway, a lot of people do get their throats cut, and it looks kind of decent. That's the only real special effects we have. And then at the end, and I haven't really spoiled anything, by the way, so if this all sounds good to you, you can turn it off now. But at the end, this is the first giallo I think I've ever seen where the obvious suspect was the killer. The stepmom was the killer the whole time. She's the only one that really could have been the killer, which I guess is somewhat of a hindsight statement to make, but it's never the obvious suspect, never, and this time it actually was. So I kind of like that, because even in the late 60s when gialli were fairly new, I still don't think I can think of a time when the obvious suspect was the killer. So the fact that it was is ironically unique. I don't know how many gialli I've watched, over 20 for sure. Probably 30 at this point, because all of them from 70 and 71 and quite a few from the late 60s. And by the way, there's not a lot from the late 60s that I actually like giallo-wise. Anyway, I just wanted to say that this was put out by Fida. Fida was the distribution company in Italy. And I believe FIDA specialized in Spanish-Italian co-productions, although they did not produce the film. The film was produced by the director and an Italian company named Apollo, or Apollo. And it was released in Italy by FIDA, and it was released in Spain by some other company that I don't think ever released another horror movie. And I was looking up FIDA because I had never heard of it before. This company has not released any other movies that I have seen. And it turns out that they did release a film in 1971. And it's in Italian, it's called The Highway Vampire. And in English, it's called The Horrible Sexy Vampire. And I found that movie. So it wasn't on any list, but it does exist, and it was put out by FIDA, and it's about a vampire. So that means next week I'm probably going to do that one. So that one's extremely obscure because it didn't even make any of these lists, and these lists are pretty complete. So we'll probably do that one next week, and we'll see you then. All right, thank you.